So in our view, there's 5 different pillars that you need to think about when you think about an investor-ready strategy. So this is a framework that we've developed. So there's 5 different pillars, but there's about 100 subcategory items under each of those. So it's quite a deal of work. So they work across strategy, governance, operations, finance and legal. Has anyone been involved in any merger and acquisitions or bought a business, things like that? Yep, okay, so a few. So you know that this is quite an onerous process, right, when you're doing that. So as a business owner, if you can start to line these things up, you might never need to enact that, but that's your investor-ready framework. So let's have a look at each category. So from a strategy point of view, I'll talk about this a little bit, but does your business plan match your personal plan? So what I mean by that is, from a personal plan point of view, are you paying yourself along the way? It doesn't matter how you pay yourself, a salary, wages, drawings, whatever. Are you paying yourself appropriately for the role that you're doing? But what about things like superannuation? Are you actually contributing to your own superannuation? AMP did a study just recently that said only 50% of business owners, irrespective of the business size, were contributing to their own superannuation. So that means 50% is not, right? The average superannuation balance for a male at age 65 is $435,000, and for females it's $381,000. The average for a business owner is $110,000. So that's a bit of a gap. So think about your own situation. Is that something you need to think about? And what about your business model and your growth model? Do you understand how you make your money and where you make your money? We've got a client that we've been working with. Started as one bloke and a ute 10 years ago. He turns over $15 million and makes a really good profit on his business. They do stuff. They do so much stuff. Their capability statement, you can't jump over it. They do so much stuff. They are everything to everyone. So we've started to ask the question of, how do you actually make your money? And they go, oh, we just make money from everything. The reality is they don't. Now, kudos to their accountant. They did the heavy lifting on this, not us. But they drilled down on divisions. They've got 5 different divisions in this business, and they do all sorts of things. But there's only one division that makes money. So we're helping them reshape their strategy moving forward. It's part of their investor-ready strategy, and their accountant's working with us. What about your valuation? Does anyone ask you, what's your number? So what number would you need if someone came along tomorrow to take your business off your hands that would provide you the income that your business gives you now? And how do you work from a governance framework point of view? Do you have delegated authorities in place? What sort of structure do you have? If you have a GM, there's a business over here that has a GM. Do you have different structures in place and different levels of authority? That's what I mean by governance. Operations, there's 3 parts to operations. It's people, process and technology. So from a people point of view, do all your key people have proper employment contracts, job descriptions, personal development plans, things like that? You'd be surprised the amount of people that don't. So if you don't, go and talk to Dawn, because Dawn's right in my eye line there. It's really important, right? And what about your processes? We've had a number of people recently work through ISO accreditation. Now that's a big onerous process and it's costly. But as part of their investor-ready strategy, they thought that having an ISO accreditation will really help them in the future. So how are your processes documented? And what about technology? In our sector at the moment, there's a lot of talk about tech stack. What's your tech stack? Now that sounds really fancy, right? But to me, I simplify it and I go, okay, so what are we using? How are we using it? And is it effective? What about finance? How visible is your reporting? And do you have systems in place that can give you good, timely, accurate information to allow you to make decisions? If you're a mechanical workshop and your guys on the floor are still filling in paper timesheets and job cards, you probably don't have the ability to get timely information as if they were using an iPhone and putting it into an app that feeds into a system. That's a true story. What about your cash flow? Managing your cash flow is really important. There's an old corporate finance saying that says cash flow repays loans, net profit doesn't. So how do you manage your cash flow? And what about capital expenditure? I mentioned before we deal a lot in Kalgoorlie. There's always a new big shiny digger to be bought, right? But how do you manage that? And what about controls and policies do you have in place around finances? Who presses the button on the wages and things like that, for example? Is your security system right? What about from a legal perspective? This is our fifth pillar. This is something that we see quite often that gets underappreciated by business owners. Now, there's a couple of lawyers in the room nodding, so you're welcome for that. But we do need our legal friends. So do you have the appropriate documentation in place? And that's around agreements, supply agreements, terms of trade, leases with your properties, all sorts of things. I saw one the other day where a business owner rent the property from the people that own the business. Two different entities own it. There's no lease agreement in place. So part of their investor-ready strategy needs to be to sort that out. And that's quite common. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about. What about from a compliance and a risk management framework point of view? How do you manage your risk? So everything we do comes with an element of risk, and there's heaps of risk being in business. So if you had a guy, if you're a mining services company and you had a guy on labour hire and he was underground and there was a collapse underground and he got trapped because there was a fire, he got out and it was okay, but would your systems be okay, and do you have the requisite cover, insurance, everything else in place if something goes wrong, because stuff goes wrong? IP ownership I put up separately because that's a really specialist area, but it's also something you probably need to consider.